Liang Sicheng was imagining how he could change his department. He wanted to transform it into some kind of educational utopia. In September 1948, the Republican government in its capital of Nanjing marked the 20th anniversary of the founding of the Central Research Academy, and China's first ever group of academicians was elected. Those attending were from three broad fields of study: the humanities, mathematics and physics, and biology. Among the first group of academicians were Liang Sicheng and his brother, the archaeologist Liang Huiyin. Their old friend, the philosopher Huiyin, was also elected. These elite scholars had distinguished themselves in their respective fields despite the ongoing war. However, at a time when most of them were producing their finest academic work, events in the outside world intervened. As the academicians were holding their meeting in September 1948, the Communist and Kuomintang armies were preparing for their final decisive battle. Dearest Wilma and John, now that I feel that we have perhaps only a month or two to write freely to you all in the United States without postal service difficulties or whatever hitch there might be, I feel a bit choked or tongue-tied. Even this letter, I only hope that it will get to you before Christmas or for Christmas. The letter, written in November or early December 1948, was the last the Fairbanks would ever receive from Liang Sicheng and Lin Huiyin. John Fairbank had recently sent Liang and Lin a copy of his new book, The United States and China, the first ever study of Sino-US relations. It was published just before there was an abrupt change in relations between the two countries. As I must say, Sicheng and I are surprised that it is so absolutely free from foreign happy misunderstanding and well-wishing, wish, hope or despair. What I particularly admire in it is the way John puts Western things in Western terms and Chinese things in Chinese terms, and yet in the same Western language, intelligible both to the American who reads about China in his own tongue and the Chinese who reads about his own country in the other tongue. We all enjoy this tremendously.
And that was a very important book. 60 years ago exactly. He says he wrote it in 1947, and now it's 2007. And it is, but at the time, it was a bombshell. I mean, Americans knew nothing about China. They had no reliable information about China. And Fairbank had a way of writing which was very accessible, very easy, 好读, easy to read, easy to understand. 好解.
Fairbank was trying to ensure that Americans and Chinese might understand each other better. And he couldn't make the Chinese understand America better, but he could try and make the Americans understand China better.
In his book, John Fairbank attempted to convey to the American people two fundamental points in particular about China. One, that it was very different from the United States in terms of society, culture, and history. And two, that if the United States government wanted its China policy to be effective and responsible, it needed to begin from understanding China. At the end of 1948, the question facing the United States government was, is it wise to side with the Kuomintang government during China's civil war? Ever since 1943, I'd believed revolution was probably unavoidable in China. The collapsing urban economy and the KMT corruption and repression visible in 1945 to 46 confirmed me in this view. When the Marshall mediation began to collapse too, it became urgent to warn the American public not to back Chiang Kai-shek and his KMT, who were so busily digging their own graves and trying to pull us in with them.
I think that Fairbanks' time in Chongqing influenced him greatly, and I think the sentiment he came away from China with at that time was that the salvation of China could not lie with the nationalists because they were too corrupt. And I think his attitude towards the Communist Party in China sometimes misunderstood. He certainly wasn't pro-communist, he wasn't a Marxist or anything like that. But I think he felt that the Chinese communists could not be worse and could be a lot better than the nationalists. And that was his general attitude. Like Chinese themselves, he hoped that China would regenerate, China would become great again. And if the communists could do that, then so be it. It was the Chinese people's choice.
As far as political views are concerned, I agree with John entirely this time. This means that I've come up closer to his views since we last argued in Chongqing or wherever. I've changed a bit by following the day-to-day issues at hand in the last 2 years, and I feel John is fairer too. By the end of 1948, following successive defeats on the battlefield, the Kuomintang was drawing up plans for a withdrawal to Taiwan. And these plans included preparing a list of elite scholars to be evacuated to the island.
那个时候，反正让我去劝两先不要走。
At all Beijing's universities, pro-communist students were working to keep the top scholars.
两先说我不会走的，他说我对北京，然后他们说了一个笑话，就是我也没东西可以工厂，我就这一辆小汽车。 他要工厂就让他拿去，让蓝屏去做吧。说完他就哈哈大笑。
我父亲的绝对没有走的思想，他就是要留下来看，他觉得共产党反正要搞建设的。清华北大的教授啊，他是不怕共产，他认为各种党派都应该有自由，这个去宣传他们的学说吧。他并不认为这个很那个。 他怕的就是说，只许你有一种思想、一种想法，不许他是喜欢这个，国民党就是当时就是说只许你相信国民党的那一套，而且把共产党说得非常可怕。反正当然我们也不是太听那些东西，但是对共产党还是有点戒心吧。
In 1949, the Kuomintang fled to Taiwan. Of the 81 academicians at the Central Research Academy, more than 60 refused to leave. Liang, Sicheng and Huiyin were among those who stayed, as were many of their friends at Tsinghua and Peking universities. The only body under the academy to leave for Taiwan in its entirety was Fu Xinian's Historical Languages Research Institute. History split our Peking friends into two groups. One sizable group would be in Taiwan after 1949, still refugees. Both groups of these Peking liberal intellectuals would continue to be kicked around by history, but they kept on trying to serve their country as best they could under a party dictatorship during civil war and revolution. None of them exactly won his battle, but neither did he quit. Eventually, someone will make a balance sheet for them all. They were a generation that met disaster, but not a lost generation by any means.